Kaylee was not just stabbed. There was other things that happened to Kaylee.
How to get this information out into the public if they're willing to do it at all. And I think they probably have some things that they just, to protect themselves, they don't want the public to find out about. I think that there was some hesitancy about the prosecution. That's the nicest word I can think of right now, some hesitancy to move forward with the trial.
You spent months preparing, and still all it took was my sister in a sheath. You work so hard to seem dangerous, but real control doesn't have to prove itself.
Was there any evidence that Coberger was following the social media of any of the victims?
So, trust us, we wanted that to be the case. We've looked for a link, and we have not found one.
While I do think that, yes, his cover-up in some capacity worked, it's odd because some of the other stuff he did was so...
They want us to believe that a straight-A student committed a quadruple homicide in just 5 minutes. His first alleged defense, with no motive, no connection to the victims, and no murder weapon ever recovered.
Jenna Cook. Bryan Kohberger.
A town in crisis needed a scapegoat, and Bryan Kohberger was chosen as the fall guy to cover up deeper corruption. Meanwhile, the victims' families are left in confusion and anguish as the real perpetrators walk free. The public has brought into the incel rage motive, but that theory falls apart when you consider that one of the victims was male. It crumbles further when you learn that Bryan Kohberger had Tinder dates. Clearly not someone completely isolated from women. Yet no one questions it. The public's anger towards Coberger is so intense, it overrides basic common sense.
I hate being in that courtroom. I hate people protecting evil. And they protect evil in there. And that's very hard for a father to deal with.
There's even been some chatter about a second weapon being used. But with all the rage focused on Coberger, few are willing to think outside of the box. For instance, the Gonzalez family stated that multiple weapons were used on Kaylee.
No, we do know that another weapon was used on Kaylee. So we don't know what that weapon was. But
They didn't recover it.
along with the knife wasn't recovered, but Kaylee was not just stabbed. There was other things that happened to Kaylee.
Where is the murder weapon? The clothes you wore that night? What did you bring into the house with you? What was the second weapon you used on Kaylee?
Their rage toward Coberger blinds them to reality. Was it two weapons? Or multiple people?
We came across a tip that would appear to be an alternate suspect.
Out of Idaho, where a court filing in the case against Bryan Kohberger is revealing some potentially bombshell DNA evidence. In the document that was filed last month and just unsealed yesterday, Kohberger's defense team reveals that there's a 3-person mixture in the DNA found underneath the left fingernail of victim Madison Mogan.
That people have made a lot of is they say they can see 4 people jogging away from the murder house. Do you see that? I mean, what's your take on that aspect? Because people online have said they see the joggers. They ask, why are they running at 3 a.m.? Could it be possible there are 4 killers that make more sense than one or two?
According to the autopsy reports, Kaylee was stabbed over 30 times and suffered blunt force trauma to the face, while Xana was stabbed more than 50 times. Keep in mind, this entire crime supposedly took place in under 5 minutes. Committed by the alleged first-time offender. Now ask yourself this, does that truly make sense?
Now, in the next part of this, we want to focus on the autopsies of two of the victims. Let's start first with Kayla Gonzalez, who had 20-plus stab wounds. And the document states that she had sharp force injuries, asphyxial injuries, blunt force injuries, and that her fatal injuries included lacerations in her left lung and liver, subdural bleeds, a stab behind her clavicle that cut her subclavian vein and artery. Phil, very hard to hear, but the reality is that is not one stab wound to the heart. That is not a quick get in, get out. That is purposeful, and she's moving, and Bryan Kohberger's going after her, and repeated stab wounds. The number of injuries surprises me a little bit when you hear all four were killed by one person in their home, 4 a.m. It happened, so many stab wounds, so many injuries.
It is shocking,
you're right.
Judge Ashley.
Being stabbed 50 times requires extreme physical exertion. It's highly unlikely that one person, especially a first-time offender, carried this out alone. The evidence just doesn't point to Coberger. It's more likely the real killers are still out there.
I mean, stabbed 50 or more times, Dr. Dupree, and that's just one of them. I'm just thinking about the energy that would take. I mean, have you ever seen a case like this where 4 people were killed that quickly, that many stab wounds? It's just sort of hard to wrap your mind around how it all went down.
I have not seen a case quite like this. I've had many stab wound case, but not so many times and not with so many people in such close proximity.
The stabbings seem to point to something much deeper. This house wasn't chosen at random. It was targeted by design. When you look at the date of the murders, 11/13/2022, and the address, 1122 King Road, a striking connection emerges. In a standard deck of cards, the king is often associated with the number 13.
November 13th, 2022.
It's almost symbolic, as if the clock struck
King Road.
and whatever was planned had to unfold.
Is there any evidence that Coberger was following the social media of any of the victims?
So, trust us, we wanted that to be the case. We've looked for a link, and we have not found one. Not one.
Yeah, through the entire investigation, I think that's something that we need, that you want, is to help to understand this and say, well, what's the connection? What was the link? And so we had every resource possible, and we worked that tirelessly, both from everything from his side, but all the victims and all the members of the house from their side. So we have never, to this date, found a single connection between him and any of the 4 victims or the 2 surviving roommates.
There was no proven connection between Coberger and the roommates. The prosecution never truly had a solid case. Had this gone to trial, Coberger likely would have walked free. Prosecutor Thompson has repeatedly made misleading claims about an alleged assault, a motive, a so-called targeted attack, and even the supposed death penalty deal. He insists the deal was made on his terms, but with no real leverage. How could that be true?
What do you say to those families who feel like that was doing a deal with the devil?
We made a proposal on our terms, not his.
I think there's still those who feel like it's what he wanted was life in prison versus the death penalty.
I don't know what was going through his head or what he wanted. One way or another, he's going to be in prison until he dies.
Wouldn't it make sense that when Thompson insisted he had the quote-unquote right guy, he pushed for the maximum punishment, but deep down knew he had no leverage and couldn't win at trial without delays, a scapegoat, book deals, tearing down the home, and covering up other officers' mistakes? Thompson claims he made the deal. But in reality, Coberger made the deal with Thompson, and Thompson accepted it quickly, without hesitation. Why would Thompson do that? Because they had the wrong guy and no solid case.
If there had been a trial, and maybe in the weeks and months and years to come, maybe the families will be provided with the evidence that they didn't see at the trial that didn't happen, and maybe they'll be able to provide it to the public. Maybe journalists will be able to get their hands on some of this stuff now that the gag order has been released. But remember, it's still all in the possession, custody, and control of the prosecution, and it's really going to be up to them how to get this information out into the public if they're willing to do it at all. And I think they probably have some things that they just, to protect themselves, they don't want the public to find out about. I think that there was some hesitancy by the prosecution. That's the nicest word I can think of right now, some hesitancy to move forward with the trial. I don't know if it's they didn't feel they were capable or they were somehow scared of going to trial, but they certainly seemed to jump on Kohberger's really the one that made the offer and say, look, I'll plead guilty if you take death off the table. And it's almost like Kohberger's team is making the plea offer and the prosecutor accepting his terms. And so, they
prosecution
jumped
was
at that pretty
relieved.
quickly. Yeah, they act like they're the ones that made some kind of plea deal. I see it the other way around. I see Coberger made the plea deal and the prosecutor accepted that.
You're so right. Go ahead, Howard.
That's exactly right. I mean, and then for the prosecution, for Bill Thompson to talk about, we'll move on, the door is closed, the judge said that. Well, we all heard Dylan Morton's statements. No one is moving on. This is going to linger forever. And only thing that's going to happen is the possibility of getting answers to specific questions. Well, that's going to be a lot harder now.
Despite the victims being awake, fighting back, and having defensive wounds, you would expect Kohberger's blood to be at the scene. But it wasn't. Instead, DNA from 3 unknown males was found. Meanwhile, Kohberger was seen in a selfie the next day after the murders with no bruises or signs of struggle. How could the prosecution have ever convicted him? They simply couldn't.
3 different DNAs found underneath Maddie's fingernails, and none of them Bryan Kohberger. None of them Bryan Kohberger.
That there were 3 profiles, 2 in the house, 1 on a glove outside. We were all like, wow.
Multiple male DNA profiles were found in the home. But as long as they blame and frame Kohberger as a patsy, the town can sleep peacefully, believing they are quote-unquote safe. It's reminiscent of the movie Arlington Road. As long as the public hears that someone is in custody, they feel secure, even if it's the wrong person. The car they claimed belonged to Kohberger isn't actually his. That white sedan seen in videos is in fact an MPD silver Ford Fusion used by undercover cops that night. So why tell us it was Kohberger's? Why did that car race out of the area and never return to patrol or circle the scene? The plot thickens. It all starts to make sense. The cops were first on the scene and destroyed evidence by throwing items in the dumpster. Why would they do that if they're supposed to be solving the case? Who are they protecting? Or better yet, who are they really working for? We know cases like this are bigger than they appear. Someone with power and money influenced and orchestrated this hit. In a small town, MPD can easily cover it up, just like so many others. Even Olivia is starting to question the obvious patsy, but her anger toward Coberger keeps her from thinking outside of the box and considering that it wasn't him.
Where what we have is during hours that There was no business being in the neighborhood unless you lived in the neighborhood or knew someone in the neighborhood, which clearly he didn't. There's no alibi there. On 23 occasions, at least, that his phone was on and with him for that time, he's over there. So you kind of have to ask yourself, why? You know, and while I do think that, yes, his cover-up in some capacity worked, it's odd because some of the other stuff he did was so dumb. He purchased a gift card for $120, turned right around, purchased the K-bar knife with the sheath, the sharpener, and vegan supplements immediately. But purchased the gift card on his debit card, then used the gift card on his parents' Amazon account, which seems so dumb, knowing what you're going to do with this weapon, right? And then on top of that, he Googles, and doesn't do this on a VPN, how to delete his Amazon purchase history, which seems so ignorant, right?
This is clearly a patsy situation, and Bryan is the fall guy. They essentially arrested him for being clean and wearing gloves. Yet, in interviews with his prison mates, they say he does the same thing in prison. So what's really the difference?
Corporal Brett Payne recalled speaking with an inmate whose cell was directly next to Coberger's at Latah County Jail. Payne explained that the inmate, whose name was redacted from the files, said Coberger quickly became annoying due to some of his habits, which included washing his hands dozens of times each day and spending 45 minutes to an hour in the shower. After Payne, who served as the lead investigator in the murder case, subsequently asked the inmate about Coberger's sleeping habits, he responded that the now convicted murderer would be awake almost all night and could be heard moving around all night per the docs.
This crime was carried out by multiple people, not just one or two, but likely 3 or 4, each with motives to attack the roommates. The prosecution never had a solid case, and it clearly shows. What's the possible motive? We know it was a party house with many illegal substances involved. There are plenty of people with bigger motives than Coberger. In fact, he's the last person anyone would suspect for this crime. It makes me question the roommates. That entire house was involved in shady activities and kept much of their lives hidden from the media to protect their image. For example, items found in the house included blue powder, weapons, and cocaine. What exactly were these girls into? Were they selling? Were they working for someone else? It certainly seems that way. Many friends said that Ethan and Xana, in particular, were hanging around very questionable people. Some initially thought that it might have been someone from their circle responsible for the attack. Could this be why Xana was stabbed the most out of all of the roommates? Another friend mentioned that Kaylee and Madison had a disturbing encounter with a man at the Corner Club bar that same night. All friends agreed the roommates were involved with lots of illegal substances. As I mentioned earlier in my videos, this was a crime of passion.
November 13th,
The targeted
2022.
stabbing of Pacific people points to something
1122
bigger
King Road.
and deeply personal to whoever was involved. The roommates have lied repeatedly. At first, they claimed they were asleep the whole time, but the audio from that night tells a different story. Murphy's barking woke up the entire neighborhood. The roommates said they stayed in their rooms all day and night, scared. Yet evidence shows they were active on Snapchat even after running past Xana's body lying on the floor, and they never called 911.
Shocking new revelations in the brutal murders of 4 Idaho college students last fall. A new report claims the 2 roommates who survived the massacre were awake and texting each other while their 4 friends were stabbed to death one by one.
One friend came forward and exposed the roommates. He took his dog for a walk past the Idaho murder home on the morning of 11/13. What he saw was shocking. The front door was wide open. The state claims Coberger entered through the sliding glass door. So why was the front door left open? It had been closed when the roommates were inside the night before, which means they left their rooms and opened it sometime after the killings. But why? Were they cleaning up?
Not terrified, like what the police report said at the probable cause warnings is not what these kids were all told.
Yeah.
It's not. And one of the girls, even on 2020, said, I think it was a girl, I'm not sure, in the black sweater or blue sweater, said, I texted Xana in the morning and I didn't hear back. Police weren't called till noon.
Wow.
They were there, and they were there early on. And what I've been told by the FBI is that they're aggressively investigating everything I've told them.
Why would they walk past Xana's body, clean after the crime, then leave their rooms with the front door wide open? To air out the house? To hide illegal substances? Then wait a full 9 hours before calling the police. 9 hours. Did you know about the white Hyundai that crashed in Eugene, Oregon during the start of the case? Driving from the Idaho murder home to Eugene, Oregon takes about 9 hours. Why would the roommates act this way? Wait, did you see that? The same size handprint left on the window at the Idaho crime scene was also found on the Hyundai Elantra in Eugene, Oregon. It's a sign. The friend also noted that after his hour-long walk, the door was still wide open. That means it was open for hours. The roommates were awake well before 8 a.m. So if the crime happened around 4 a.m., they were likely cleaning for at least 4 hours. Without a trial, this is likely a secret they'll take to their graves. But we see through it. We know something happened that night. And it's nothing like what the mainstream media is telling us. So why did he confess? Coberger was psychologically manipulated and railroaded into a confession. But this might be part of a larger strategy. It could be laying the groundwork for an appeal once the real killers, the ones Moscow may be protecting, are finally exposed.
He can appeal. Listen.
When Bryan Kohberger took the plea deal that saved his life, he also agreed to not appeal the decision in the future. waiving his right to appeal. However, defendants still have the right to post-conviction relief, even if they waive their right to appeal. Issues like ineffective assistance of counsel, a discovery violation, prosecutorial misconduct, or that he was pressured into taking the deal.